When I bought the lakefront property on Willow Creek Drive, I thought I'd finally found the perfect escape. 10 acres of quiet land, a beautiful view of the lake, and a house I'd designed to be as peaceful as the surrounding woods. I'd heard whispers about the local HOA before closing the deal, neighbors grumbling about fines for unauthorized garden gnomes, or grass longer than 2.5 inches, but I brushed it off. I had the deeds, the permits, and the freedom that came with owning every inch of my property. I didn't think I'd even have to deal with the HOA. After all, my land technically sat just outside their development boundary. Or so I thought. By the start of summer, my infinity pool was finished. It was a dream project, black stone tiles that shimmered in the sun, a shallow deck for lounging, and an infinity edge that melted seamlessly into the lake beyond. I'd added a waterfall feature and a fire pit for late-night gatherings. It wasn't just a pool. It was an oasis. The first incident happened on a humid Saturday morning. I was sipping coffee on the deck, enjoying the sound of the water feature, when I saw a group of people, maybe a dozen in total, walking down my driveway like they owned the place. There were moms in wide-brimmed hats holding toddlers' hands, teenagers carrying inflatable flamingos, and men in sunglasses hauling coolers. Leading the charge was a tall woman with short blonde hair, oversized sunglasses, and a clipboard clutched in one hand like a badge of authority. Karen. Even before she opened her mouth, I knew. She had the posture of someone who believed the world bent to her will, the kind of person who smiled at you while already plotting to tell you what you were doing wrong. "Excuse me," she called out, stepping onto my stone path without hesitation. "The neighborhood families are here to use the pool." I set my coffee down, unsure if I'd heard her right. What? She adjusted her sunglasses and gestured toward the people behind her, who were starting to fan out across my front lawn. "The pool. The HOA community pool. The kids have been looking forward to this all week." I laughed, because what else could I do? "There is no community pool here. This is my private property." Karen's smile faltered, but only for a second. She recovered quickly, her voice carrying that sharp, practiced tone of someone used to winning arguments. "Don't be ridiculous. The HOA bylaws state that any shared amenities must remain accessible to all residents. Your pool is within HOA boundaries, which makes it shared property." I raised an eyebrow, trying to stay calm. "No, it doesn't. My deed clearly shows the boundary line, and this pool is entirely on my land. Nobody besides me has access rights." Karen tilted her chin upward, as though she were addressing a stubborn child. "Sir, I'm the HOA president. I know every inch of this neighborhood. Now, step aside and unlock the gate." Behind her, the families were getting restless. A teenager bounced a beach ball in his hands while a little girl tugged on her mother's arm, whispering excitedly about the big slide. I could feel my blood pressure rising. "You step foot beyond that gate," I said evenly, "and you'll be trespassing. This is not up for debate." Karen laughed, an ugly, mocking sound. "Trespassing? Oh, that's cute. The HOA owns this land. You're just a resident, and you're about to find out how serious we are about enforcement." Her words carried across the driveway, loud enough for a couple of neighbors to poke their heads out of their homes. One man leaned on his fence, clearly entertained by the drama. I took a step closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "Touch my gate, and I'll call the police. I have the deed, the permits, and a lawyer who'd love to explain property lines to you in court." Karen smirked, her sunglasses reflecting the morning sun. "You wouldn't dare." I met her gaze without blinking. "Try me." Her smile vanished, replaced by a scowl that deepened as she pulled out her phone. "Fine," she snapped, dialing 911 with theatrical flair. "If you want to be hostile, I'll handle this the official way." She stepped back, voice rising as she spoke to the dispatcher. "Yes, I need officers here right away. There's a man threatening families and blocking access to a shared community pool. He's aggressive and refusing to comply with neighborhood rules." I folded my arms, leaning casually against the gate as she wrapped up the call. Behind her, some of the residents shifted uncomfortably. One mother muttered something about maybe coming back later, but Karen waved her off. "No one leaves. We have rights." 15 minutes later, a black and white patrol car rolled up the street, siren lights off but presence commanding. Two officers stepped out, one tall and serious looking, the other younger with an easy smile. They scanned the scene, families with pool toys, a woman clutching a clipboard like it was a weapon, and me, standing calm and quiet on my own property. The taller officer approached first. "Sir, we got a call about a disturbance here." Before I could answer, Karen rushed forward, pointing at me with an accusatory finger. "Yes, officer. This man is illegally blocking access to the HOA pool. He's threatening people, and we don't feel safe." The officer turned to me, raising an eyebrow as if to say, "Your side of the story." Without a word, I reached for the folder I'd brought out with my morning coffee, the one containing my deed, the surveyor's map, and every legal document tied to the property. I handed it over, calm and steady. "This pool," I said, "is on my private property. You can verify the parcel number right there. I have every right to deny entry to anyone I choose." The officer flipped through the documents, his expression neutral but leaning toward understanding. The younger officer stepped closer, peering over his shoulder. When the tall officer looked back up, his tone was polite but firm. "Ma'am," he said to Karen, "this isn't HOA property. According to this deed, this entire area, including the pool, is privately owned." Karen blinked rapidly behind her sunglasses. "That can't be right. I'm the HOA president. I know every lot line in this neighborhood." The younger officer chuckled under his breath. "Well, looks like you don't know this one, ma'am." For a moment, the only sound was the quiet lapping of water against the edge of the pool. Then Karen's face turned crimson, her lips curling into a tight, angry line. "This isn't over," she hissed, turning sharply on her heel. "You'll regret this." As the crowd slowly dispersed, some muttering apologies, others shooting me sheepish looks, I leaned against the gate again, sipping the last of my coffee. Karen was right about one thing. It wasn't over. But what she didn't know was that I had been preparing for this day. For weeks, I'd been digging into HOA records, documenting their harassment, and uncovering a string of shady dealings that made my blood boil. If Karen wanted a war over my pool, she had no idea just how prepared I was to fight back and to win. The next morning, I woke up to a scene straight out of a bad sitcom. A bright orange paper was taped to my front gate, flapping in the breeze. Bold letters screamed, "Notice of HOA violation, unauthorized structure and unapproved amenity. Immediate compliance required. Penalty, $500 per day until resolved." I laughed out loud. It was the kind of humor that only comes from being so angry that laughing is the only alternative to smashing something. By noon, Karen was back, this time with 2 board members and a man in a cheap suit who introduced himself as the HOA attorney. They stood outside my locked gate like they were staging a corporate coup. "You're officially in violation," Karen announced, her sunglasses hiding her eyes but not her smugness. "If you don't grant community access to this pool, we will file a lien against your property and take legal action." I didn't bother opening the gate. "Karen," I said evenly, "I don't know what fantasy world you live in, but you have no authority here. My land isn't part of your HOA. You want to file something? Go ahead. Just know you're going to lose, publicly." The attorney cleared his throat, clearly trying to intimidate me. "Sir, the HOA has rights to enforce." I cut him off, holding up my phone. "And I have a recording of this conversation, plus your threats from yesterday." "Keep talking." For the first time, Karen hesitated. I could see it in the way her lips pursed, the slight tilt of her head as she realized this wasn't going to be as simple as bullying a new resident into submission. But she wasn't done, not by a long shot. That evening, I discovered the next escalation, dozens of emails from the HOA sent to the neighborhood listserv, accusing me of being a dangerous, aggressive homeowner, who was illegally blocking access to shared amenities. They claimed my pool construction was unpermitted, a blatant lie, and encouraged neighbors to call the authorities if they witnessed any suspicious activity near my property. By the next morning, a handful of curious residents were driving slowly past my driveway, their necks craning to get a glimpse of the troublemaker. What Karen didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had been digging into HOA records for weeks, even before the pool incident. It started when I bought the property. I'd noticed inconsistencies in their boundary maps and financial disclosures. Curious, I'd filed a few information requests and, thanks to a very helpful county clerk, uncovered enough to make me raise an eyebrow. Misallocated funds, maintenance fees for projects that didn't exist, and, my favorite, unapproved usage of community docks and slips that technically sat on my section of the lake. That's right, the HOA didn't own the docks. I did. The deed had been updated 30 years ago, but no one had bothered to read it, or if they had, they'd conveniently ignored it. I knew I could use that leverage when the time came. And now, the time had arrived. I called a meeting, not a formal one, but a quiet gathering. I sent invitations to a handful of neighbors, the ones who had been friendly, the ones who whispered apologies when Karen wasn't looking. I hosted it by the lake, beers in a cooler, burgers sizzling on the grill. By the time the sun dipped low, I had their attention. "Listen," I said, gesturing toward the docks. "Technically, every boat tied up here is trespassing. This entire stretch of shoreline, the docks, the slips, even the launch, belongs to me. The HOA doesn't own it. I do. And I've got the paperwork to prove it." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the group. One man, a father of 3, rubbed his forehead. "Karen told us, she said we paid for these docks in our fees." "You did," I said grimly. "She just didn't tell you that you don't legally control them." I let that sink in before continuing. "Here's the deal. I'm not a bad neighbor. I don't care if people use the docks, respectfully. But the harassment stops. The lies stop. And Karen, she's going to learn she picked the wrong person to push around. By the next HOA meeting, the cracks in Karen's perfect little empire were starting to show. Word had spread fast. People were angry, demanding to know why they'd been misled, why thousands in dues had gone to projects that didn't legally belong to the association. I didn't even have to attend the meeting to know it had descended into chaos. My phone blew up with texts from neighbors. "She's losing it. They're calling for a vote to remove her. You're a legend." But I wasn't done. The next weekend, I posted bright, laminated signs along the docks. "Private property, trespassers will be prosecuted." Beneath it, in smaller print, I added, "Current residents with written permission may continue using these facilities. HOA board members are not authorized for access until further notice." The message was clear. Karen showed up that afternoon, shrieking like a banshee, demanding to know how I dared to restrict her access. She stormed up to my gate, waving a stack of papers that she claimed were legal documents proving the HOA's authority. I didn't even get up from my chair. I just smiled, held up my phone, and started recording as she launched into another tirade, her voice carrying over the water. "Go ahead, Karen," I said calmly. "Keep talking. Every second of this is evidence for the lawsuit we'll be filing if you step 1 foot past that line." That night, I emailed the video to every homeowner in the neighborhood. By morning, it had gone viral, at least locally. The comments poured in, siding with me, mocking Karen's outburst, and demanding her resignation. Within a week, the HOA board voted her out. She tried to fight it, of course, threatened more legal action, sent nasty emails, even left me a handwritten letter dripping with passive-aggressive venom, but it was over. The best part, with her gone, the board finally sat down with me like civilized adults. We drafted an agreement. The docks would remain accessible to respectful residents, the harassment would stop, and my pool, my private pool, would be left alone. And just to make sure the message stuck, I hired a local attorney to draft a cease and desist letter, complete with a polite reminder that any further interference would result in immediate legal action. As I sat by my pool that evening, drink in hand, watching the sun sink below the horizon, I couldn't help but smile. Karen had thought she could bully me. She'd thought she could twist the truth and rally the neighborhood against me. What she didn't realize, what she still probably hasn't figured out, is that I don't lose wars I didn't start. Especially when I'm holding all the cards.